Hello. So I am Dr. Margaret A. Brunson, 1/5 of the R&B sensation. Just kidding. 1/5 of GAWD, the Grown Ass Women's Delegation. And I am here with episode 3 of Talks with GAWD. You know, in our last episode of Talks with GAWD, we delved into intuition and we tapped into the need to trust ourselves and to be confident in who we are so that we can honor our intuition. Well, I'd like to continue in the spirit of that conversation and dig in just a little bit more. In Toni Morrison's acclaimed novel, Beloved, there's a line where Beloved says to Paul D, "I want you to touch me on the inside part and call me my name." Now, throughout the years, many scholars have unpacked what that line meant in that moment and beyond that moment. But it is not my intention to critique that line as much as it is to use it as a framework for understanding this larger conversation about self-love and self-esteem. In many cultures in the African diaspora, naming a child upon birth is a very important decision because people believe that names carry meaning. And because those names carry meaning, they also have the power to shape not only the personality of that child, but the inner and outer life of that child as well. My parents named me Margaret, which means pearl. And in giving me that name, they wanted me to never forget that I am treasured, valuable, worthy, and precious. But I didn't always love my name. I didn't always like my name. I thought it was an old lady name. Why would they give a baby an old lady name? Not realizing that all old ladies named Margaret were once young. But I wanted a cooler sounding name. I wanted to be different. And as I got older, this desire to be someone other than myself increased. Well, this may come as a surprise to some who know me, but I didn't always walk the earth with the amount of confidence that I have now. Over time, I found myself digging into the inner parts of me to understand what about my name felt unbelievable. I had to chip away and peel back all the things that sought to make a lie out of the powerful truth of my name. And so, after a while, I began to take ownership of my many names: valuable, enough, worthy, pearl, treasure, beloved. Bell Hooks, in her book, Rock My Soul, Black People and Self-Esteem, discusses the complexities of living as a Black person and attempting to cultivate a sense of self-esteem in a country that devalues and dehumanizes us at every turn. She also expresses that without a healthy sense of self-esteem being confidence in our ability to think, confidence in our ability to cope with the basic challenges of life, confidence in our right to be successful and happy, and feeling worthy of our own purpose, needs, and wants. Without a healthy sense of self-esteem, it's extremely difficult to develop self-love. And I agree. On this episode of Talks with GAWD, I want to have an open conversation with my sisters about self-love and self-esteem. There are so many things to unpack here, but my sisters, these 4 clergy women who are unlike any other clergy women I know, each bring their own uniqueness and flair to life. And y'all, they live. They truly live. But not only do they live as Black women who love themselves deeply. And from that place, they love their communities deeply. So I want to know a little bit more about their journeys and their names. Welcome to episode 3 of Talks with GAWD, Call Me My Name.
Friends, welcome to our 3rd episode of Talks with GAWD. I am so grateful that you all have chosen to join us whenever you're watching us this morning, afternoon, evening, just getting your life together with my 4 fabulous sisters. If you've read our description, you know that Talks with GAWD, the Grown Ass Women's Delegation, that we are a group of friends, colleagues, contemporaries, the fellowship of sisters who have just chosen to invite other people into our conversations. We don't come as those who believe we are experts. We believe that we are learners, but that we leverage one another's gifts. And so instead of believing that we somehow can navigate this life by ourselves, that there's something really special about tethering ourselves to one another in this thing called life. I am listening today, shea buttered from the head to my socks, bringing my full self to this moment. I know my sisters are also bringing their full selves to this moment, and we hope that you will do the same thing too. None of us live behind a veil, and I think in order to have really honest conversations, it means we have to have honest conversations, which means we need to be honest with ourselves. So we hope that you will come with ears that are open, with the ears of your heart, also open to believe that maybe something we say this day might actually inform the ways in which we live beyond this video. I want to introduce my sisters to you really quickly. Well, one, my name is Lisa Yaboa, and I serve as a pastor in Southeast Raleigh. I have my dear sister, Angela Whitenhill Shields. That's right, got it right this time, because Jesus is Lord. Dr. Donna Coltrane Battle, put some respect on her name. Also my dear friend, Reverend Shalise Overy, and Dr. Margaret Antoinette Brunson. You'll understand
the whole government name.
her whole government name. I'll leave all the nicknames off, but it's important for you to know why while we stop and pause to actually call one another by name every time we gather for these conversations. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Margaret Antoinette Brunson.
Thank you, Pastor. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with y'all today. As much as I try to get away from this topic, it continues to kind of just sit on my neck like this. And so as I thought about how to enter into this conversation today, I thought about sharing just a quick story about my hair. So most people know that I've written a book about my hair, New Growth, How My Hair Saved My Life. It was about my natural hair journey. And recently when I decided to lock my hair, I decided to give my locks a name. And so I named my locks Beloved. And the reason I named my locks Beloved is because there were 3 affirmations that I was sitting with right before I decided to lock my hair. And my hair has since about 2009, my hair has just been like a symbol of spiritual growth for me. It's a tangible thing that I can look at every day to reflect on my own personal growth as well as my connection with God. And so the 3 affirmations that I was sitting with when I decided to lock my hair were, I deserve to be loved, I deserve to be well, I deserve to be loved well. And so out of that came this idea of beloved, that I am beloved, and that if my locks are beloved, then I too am beloved because they're growing out of my scalp. So this concept of like naming ourselves and naming who we are and seeing ourselves in that light is very important to me. And I think it's a powerful tool for us as Black women to lean into our names and to own all the names that we have, and to also reject the names that don't fit us or that no longer serve us. And so one of the lines from Toni Morrison, may her soul rest in peace, one of her books, Beloved, there's a line that says, I want you to touch me on the inside part and call me my name. And we're not going to get into the context of that line, maybe another episode. But touching yourself on the inside part, kind of going in deeper and calling yourself by your name is what I want to talk about in the context of self-love and self-esteem. And so I want to just ask y'all my first question, which is, what is your name? And it could be your birth name. It could be the name that you like to be called by. And then in addition to that, when did you learn to love your name? And I think just kind of wrapped around those questions is this, I want to hear about your journey of self-love and your journey of sort of owning your name. And you can answer that however you want to.
I'm not going first this time. I refuse.
I think so. I definitely have a unique name. I never, I never thought much of it though. Like it always felt suitable or whatever. So I mean, people might have had in certain contexts a difficult time pronouncing it, but you know, you kind of correct them and move on from that. I remember I was probably a teenager, maybe possibly a young adult, when I heard my grandmother and my aunt having a conversation, and they were like, "When your dad decided to name you Shalise, we thought that's a strange name." I said, "And then what happened?" She was like, "Oh, and then we just got used to it." I was like, "So you still really don't like it?" But yeah, you know, and then I guess, you know, then when you come into the churchy world, so my name is Shalise, but as you can see on the screen, it's spelled like chalice, right? And so they're, you know, they're
call you that.
yeah, and Lisa does enjoy calling me that, and I allow it, you know, because I accept whatever, you know, spiritual significance that might have. I think more than anything, it probably reminds me of God's providence, like this idea that like my dad, who was unchurched, would find this name that's very like connected to Christian liturgy. And even though I don't think like either of my parents, my dad most especially, expected me to have a vocation in ministry, it just says that kind of like, you know, like what happens is, you know, is what God intends, kind of you end up where you're supposed to be, you know, whether anybody else ever thought about it. You know, sometimes people ask me, "Oh, did you have like were your parents in ministry or your grandparents?" I'm like, "No, like just me." And so yeah, so that's like, and I still love my name. And the interesting thing about like my name now, so I never really particularly like my last name. And so I always said I look forward to like getting rid of that, but you know, I'm pushing 40 and it's become so much a part of my identity that I figure I'll probably just keep it too.
Yep. I like your name.
Oh my thoughts. Go ahead. Oh, I'll just jump in real quick. A lot of my thoughts are around my last name, so I appreciate you naming that, Shalise, because my first name is Angela. My middle name is Ashley. And I think my mom just picked it because it, you know, rolled together. But I feel like you, Margaret, the Angela name at first felt like an older name. Like I saw it on Who's the Boss. Like that's the only person I knew Angela in my life. So I was like, I didn't know how to feel about that. I was like, well, I guess she's cool. But over time, it became, my mom kept telling me it means messenger of God. It means messenger of God. And so there's been this kind of growing into that. And I think I always not run from that, but I always kind of struggle with like, you know, that part of my identity. I always try to find some other parts of my identity to really bolster up. So my name feels like an anchor in a good way. I don't find a lot of people with the name, and so I find a little uniqueness in it. But I'll say, maybe we'll talk a little more about this later. The last name is like my whole life story, mainly because I've been through divorce. And so women who have a name, and I'll talk about a little about that process, and the idea of choosing to take on, if you're in a heterosexual marriage, take on your husband's name, that has been a huge part of my own identity and development. I'm now hyphenated, but all that to say, I'll leave some of that for later, that the last name is the part that I think I still work through my own identity through, so.
I have to say that I absolutely geeked out when I saw what this episode was going to be about, because I've oftentimes, especially like if I am going to meet with a group of people and I have to introduce myself, I always introduce myself starting with my first, middle, and last name, because I grew up within a Ghanaian household, and names are so important. I mean, if you're Kojo, I know that you're born on a Monday. If you're Kwame, I know that you're born on the weekend. If you are Ajwa, I know that you're born on a Monday. If you're Ya, I know that you're born on a Thursday. I mean, a Ghanaian says their name and you're kind of like, you know, the region, you know, where their family members are from. So I have always grown up with this sense that my name is like attached to my belly button. My belly button is attached to people, which means that I'm attached to a whole story. So I just, oftentimes I'm like, if you want to know my bio, just know my name. And so my first name, which Lisa, is a derivative of the name Elizabeth, which means consecrated to God. And my dad said that when he first saw me, when I was born, he just had this sense that my life was going to be used to the glory of God. Most of my life, I fought him on that. And then look where I am. Boo. Sorry, I just can't stand when my parents are right. Then my middle name, the Lord is working on my heart. My middle name is Nashome. And Nashome is every one of my cousins who are females, who are the firstborn girls of my uncles. We are all Nashome. And my grandmother, Rose, preferred to call us by our Ghanaian middle names. Oftentimes, and we can talk a little bit about this another day, but a lot of times for Ghanaians, they will give their children English names when they're christened, which is, that's a whole colonization. I won't even go down that road. But so my grandmother preferred to call us by Nashome, which then we'd have to say, which one, grandmother? Rita Nashome, or Lisa Nashome, or Erica Nashome, because there were, all of us would be in the house together. But it's a reminder who we're connected to, and I think my grandmother loved calling us that because it reminded her of her sons who created these, were co-laborers in creating these beautiful children. And then Yaboa, for me, who also grew up in the low country of South Carolina, where people will ask, who are your people? And you can say, oh, I'm a Glover, I'm a good wine. When I would say Yaboa, people would know, oh, you're not really from here. You're from someplace else. But at least I have a sense of where I'm connected in regards to, oh, my dad's from Accra, my mom's from Cape Coast. It's, I don't want to say it's a place of pride, but it does help me to know the genesis of my story, especially for many of us who are Black in this country, who oftentimes yearn for where's really our home. That last name helps me to know where my home is. But I will say, as much as I can tell my story based on my name, sometimes the particularities of my name also made me feel a little distant and homeless. I talk like the first day of school, I always cringed because I knew people were not going to pronounce my name correctly. And it was always this feeling of, oh, I'm the alien in our midst, like, God, I would have loved to have been a Goodwine or a Glover or a Simmons or a Ravenel. It just, so when we talk about kind of like falling in love, like kind of self-love, I was given a name, but it wasn't until 40 that I could claim my name in a new way, like where I had agency over the beauty of the story attached to my name, which I know we'll talk more about that, but that's my name, Lisa Nashome Yaboa. Lots of stuff to bubble in on the SAT.
So my story is probably very similar to Margaret and Lisa in that, I grew up really not liking my name. I felt like it was plain. I felt like I didn't meet a lot of people who had my name. If I did, they were older people. I could find my name whenever we went on vacation in these little, in the little shops. I could find my name there, but so yeah, I struggled with that particularly. And I actually had conversations with my mom about it. And she's like, well, one auntie did say to name you LaDonna. And she says, another person said Dominique. And I was like, ooh, that would have been great. Like, you should have done that, right? And she said, but I decided to just keep it at Donna. And she's like, because I'm a simple person, and she's like, I wanted you to just have a simple name that was just very clear. And she says, I didn't want anyone to be able to look at your application and see that you were, guess that you were not, or that you were Black and cut you off before. So she was already thinking of those things. And that was, and that's kind of been like a theme for me and my sister as we were naming our children. Well, I think the other difficulty for me with my name is that there's the Coltrane family, which is my maiden name. The Coltrane family in Caswell County, there was only two, my father and his brother.
And so of all the Coltrane children, you know, in school, we're the only Coltranes. And so I loved my last name, but of all of the five Coltrane children, I was the only one whose first name did not begin with a C. And I felt like I was out of the loop. Like I really felt like it was jacked up. And so that was another conversation I had with my mom and dad. Like, why didn't y'all name me? And I mean, I'm in the middle. Like, I'm literally like in the middle. And I'm like, why didn't you all name me, you know, with a C? And well, I'm one of two in the middle. And they were like, well, we wanted to name you after your father. My dad's name was Donald. And then Vinay, which was my middle name, was a name that my mom kind of created. She liked Renee, but she wanted to give me a part of her. Her first name is Veronica. And so she made it Vinay. So I was Donna Vinay Coltrane. And so over time, what I came to realize is that my name speaks to who I come from, right? I am a coming from my mother and my father. This DV, right? This union and this love that they created. And so that's what helped me to kind of embrace it. But it took me some time to really move from this narrative that I didn't realize had kind of taken root in me around kind of being the oddball out, and how that story of seeing myself in that way because I wasn't named a C name, and, you know, sometimes I would ask questions that other people weren't asking, and, you know, I struggled, you know, socially in school, that I felt like that narrative kind of followed me, where I always kind of felt like I was out, not fully in, and that marked that was an identity marker for me moving through middle school and high school, like being so exhausted by that, and so exhausted by the social tensions and the some would say bullying today. I didn't name it as bullying at that time, but that is what kind of matured me, I would say, early high school, late middle school, to really walk into the reality of who I was and not care, like truly not care, to be okay, learning that loneliness and being alone were not the same things. And then as I've gotten older, I've discovered that yes, I'm a very simple person. It only takes a handful of things to make me happy and to bring me joy. And my name means noble lady. And so I've just leaned into it. And it's not so much of now, how does my name shape me, but how do I live inside who I am? And that in many ways dictates the evolution of my name. Now that I'm married to a battle, I'm the noble lady of battle. So I feel like, you know, I will argue you down right quick.
Always got your battle clothes on.
I'm in the army of the Lord. I'm in the army of the Lord.
This is so good. I'm actually learning some things about y'all. This is great. So my mind is kind of all over the place, but I want to try to stay focused. But I want to pull out a couple of things that y'all have said, and that I heard. So in speaking of sort of the uniqueness of our names and also our experiences with our names, I kind of hear like that our names really connect us to a story and to a people, but they can also make us feel very disconnected from those around us, especially if we don't feel a connection through our name, especially when we're meeting new people and that's the first thing we share about ourselves is our name. And it makes me think of, that train of thought makes me think of this Audre Lorde quote, and I don't have the exact quote, but she talks about naming and defining ourselves for ourselves. And if we don't do that, we'll basically be eaten alive by other people's expectations. And to me, like defining yourself for yourself, the beginning of that is like owning your name, you know, naming yourself, owning your name. And so one of my questions is really related to, as Black women, and we were once Black girls, and we grew up in this context and in this country that named us all kinds of things. And just like you, Donna, I didn't name it bullying at the time, but that's exactly what was happening. But we got called names, and we're still called names. And those names are not messenger of God. Those names are not noble lady. You know, those names are not, you know, light and sent from God or pearl, right? Those names are totally opposite of that. And I think when we're called those names, it makes it difficult for us to hold on to our name and to hold on to the name that we do have and that God gave us. So what names do you often have to reject in order to hold on to your self-love and self-esteem?
Mm.
Margaret, I was thinking a lot about this question. Thankfully, Margaret prepped us. And if I had to give a thesis for all the names that I've ever been called, most of those names have been perversely polite. You know, I can't say that the names that people have like hurled at me have sounded malicious, but they've been perversely polite. And the thread holding all of the names together would be, Lisa, you're a caveat. You know, it's always like people will say something about me that sounds really kind, but it's always in comparison to something else. So whether it's like, you are so bop-a-da-bop-a-da-bop, you know, which means you're so different than whatever perception or conception you have, which then puts a lot of weight on me to be like, oh God, I got to perform so that you'll continue to call me this thing. And you know, and I think when you journey in a world that is always like this, you got to be the socially appropriate Black, you got to be the likable Black, you got to be the happy Black, you got to, you know, sometimes the nice things that people say to you really feel like an anvil around your neck. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, yeah, that I was just always it was like compared over and against, and to the ear, it sounds really lovely, but it's actually not really lovely. Or, you know, this is something that I've had to really journey through, especially around colorism, but always the comma for a dark-skinned girl. And like, so then what are you saying about me that you always add the comma for a dark-skinned girl? So, I don't know. I think it's that comparison, that caveat. You're always like over and against that. Just made it very difficult to sometimes just be at home in myself, because people were always naming me to deconstruct me, which means that in every single moment when there's a microaggression, I'm having to reconstruct myself. Like, how do I come back to myself when you've like dismembered me? Then now I got to like spend all this time as a third grader remembering myself, just with one fell swoop of saying something about me. Ooh, y'all. Okay. The next episode, I think I know where I'm going.
All right.
Touch something in me, Margaret. You done touch something special.
The Lord done dropped something
On
in
the
your
inside
spirit.
part. On the inside part.
Ooh, Lord.
I just want to piggyback off of that.
Yes.
When I heard this, I was like, man, I don't think I've been called names like you. Like, I don't think I've heard. But when you said that for me, Lisa, something opened up. That I am named by how I help people, and then it constructed my identity. So if I wanted to be rowdy and rebel, which I think there's an element of me that is very non-conforming, most people would say, she's so nice, she's so accommodating, she's so, you know, she's so personable, which is good. There isn't bad things. But I always am named by how I make people feel, which is good. And it does lock me into my own feeling is not welcome. Not that these people are trying to do that to me. So when you said that, I was like, the naming of me, which is really identity, right? I've been named as how I make others feel and how they have really blessed by my presence. But most of that is me like navigating and surviving, you know, issues of oppression, whatever, like trying to make sure I don't stand out. And so if I ever wanted to be the other side of that, it's like, whoa. This is not you, Angela. Literally, this is not you. And so there's something about the affirmative identity that locks you in and doesn't allow the other part, and then the audacity of people to say that that's not you when you let that out.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. That makes me think about something, because like honestly, like when you say it, the only thing that comes up for me is like, what's the name that people have put on you that like that you have to reject in a sense. And honestly, it is pastor. for me because of like what people think about when they hear that word. And when you take on that role so young, you know, like when you become somebody's pastor in your mid-20s, right? As you know, as you continue like to grow, like there's even something that means to that meant to me at that time, and a role that I was trying to play in that. And then to be like, well, like I don't know, like I think I actually do want to wear some short shorts, and you know, and whatever, and you know, and dance because you know the music is here, and so and whatever else that might have meant. Like it was hard then to embrace that because people had this idea of what it meant to be a pastor and saw you in that role, and it was very much confining. And when I hit a point where I was no longer anybody's specifically pastor, like I felt so free, right? That I was like, oh wow, I can be whoever I want to be now. And I knew at that time that it was something that I was going to have to really push into heavily, so that when I became somebody's pastor again, like I was still living in that freedom that I had become accustomed to.
Alice, you done spoke the doggone truth.
Yeah, that's good right there, Chalice.
I just want you to know, also as a pastor, I do not believe that flannel pajamas are the same thing as lingerie. I just want to say that. That's what people think when they hear. I just need that to go on the record.
I would agree.
Well, you know, yeah, I say all that. You know, like as I'm listening to you all, Lisa, for me, because I've always struggled with my weight, and struggle, even the word struggle for me, because I've always been healthy, I've always been very physically active, I've always been moderate, but even the struggle speaks to the standard that's been set, right? I cannot tell you how many times I've been told, oh, you have a pretty face, or oh, you're so pretty for a big girl, or no, here is the I mean, you talk about people being, you know, politely condescending, right? Or like masking an insult with a compliment. You know, that's what I love about you. You never let your weight hold you back. You know, those kinds of things have always kind of inundated me. And then because, yes, Shalise and Lisa and Angela, because we are in a male dominated vocation, right? I cannot tell you how often I've also been told, like, someone will hear me preach, or I will teach, and it will be, oh my gosh, you are such an exceptional preacher, for like you preach as good as men.
You're like, they preach like me.
And I was like, I'm really not exceptional. You just haven't heard my sisters preach, right? If you hear more sisters preach, you would know that there are a lot of sisters who are like putting it in. As a matter of fact, okay, let me not digress. So
Y'all are trash.
We know, darling. It's okay.
You know,
this is why I love y'all so much.
Hashtag
but it's the truth,
trash.
right? Or this understanding that if someone hears me preach and my bio has been read, they automatically assume that I'm a gifted preacher because I went to Duke Divinity School, and I will shut them down quickly. I said, no, both of my parents were skilled storytellers and educators. You know, like my mom was an educator and my dad educated in his own way. I said they were skilled storytellers. I said, and let me tell you, my undergirding is at North Carolina A&T State University.
You said just
right?
You didn't know.
Yes, in case you didn't know, like this gifting came with me to Duke. You know,
that's right.
Just because I learned certain things didn't mean that, oh my gosh, Duke just all of a sudden made me into this wonderful whatever, right? And so that has never kind of been my standard. And so all of these things interface along with the things that we hold, right? Sitting in a space and having to wonder whether or not, you know, what's rising in me is going to be heard as anger, or what's rising in me is going to be heard as aggressive, or whether, you know, or not what I wear is going to be seen as too provocative, or not covering myself enough, either because of my size and because of my race. So, I mean, it's all of those things that I have had to cast off and say, you know what? I don't care. Like, who I am is who I am. And that doesn't mean that I don't do self-talk. It doesn't mean that I don't have people like you all, people like my husband, and close friends who are pouring into me and reminding me when I forget, right? Reminding me, no, I need you to not own that, because that's not yours. That's not you, right? So I do have to have that around me, but it has been a journey that I feel like, yes, now I've reached a point in my life where I'm unapologetically who I am. And I got a few quips that I can like say back now. I'm not caught off guard anymore. I got a few things running in my head. So when somebody say it, I can just say it back and they be like, oh, okay.
It's called the
I need
art
to
of the
write some
clap
stuff
back.
down that I can keep, because I'm never like witty in the moment and I always regret it later. But that's when we do. I'm gonna have it prepared.
You have to remember. Yes, you have to memorize them and practice.
Thank you for that.
The art of the clap back. The artist, you have to practice. You have to perfect your art, perfect your craft.
Yeah.
Y'all, this is so good. I hope somebody's getting free right now. Y'all are my pastors. So this conversation makes me think about how a lot of times we conflate the words worth and value. And I think especially Black women, we take on the names of either too much or we're not enough. And I think we constantly hear that over and over again. Either we're too much, we're angry, we're aggressive, we're, brash, we are, all these other names, or we're not enough. We're not small enough, we're not tall enough, we're not, light enough, dark enough, our hair is too nappy. Like all of these different ways that make us feel like we're not worthy. And I know that worthiness is something that a lot of Black women struggle with. I think what happens is we conflate the words worth and value. And so we find all of these ways to increase our value. And a lot of times those are like things that require us to spend money. We spend all kinds of money, like trying to adorn ourselves, make ourselves feel more beautiful, look more beautiful. And we think that increases our sense of self-worth, but it doesn't, right? And so we're constantly reaching and trying to figure out, like, how can I feel more worthy? And I think at some point you have to realize there's no monetary or dollar amount that we can place on our self-worth, and that we have to really just own our names. We have to own our sense of worth. So I want to know, from your perspective as mothers, friends, sisters, clergy women, just grown ass women, how do you name your sense of self-worth? Like, how do you name that? What does that mean? What does that look like for you? And then I guess if you could speak to how you might cultivate self-worth with other Black women.
I'll start by just saying that when I became a therapist, I started, so this is like the inverse. Part of my work, I work with children who are neglected and abused, so they're physically and sexually abused. And, they would say, people would give me what we call the Humpty Dumpties. Like, these were kids who kept coming back from foster system, they kept coming back. It was a treatment facility, and people didn't know what to do with them. And I was a clinician and a chaplain. So it was like, well, maybe the chaplain can figure it out, right? What I figured out was that when you get passed around home to home and your life is the way it is, it tears your self-esteem down. So the way in which we built self-esteem was to find character traits instead of what we would call preferences or likes. So if you ask a child, who are you? They say, I like basketball. I'm good at basketball. I like pizza. That's a preference or what I like. That's the things can change, right? Character traits are these things I tell them, it never changes. It's assertive, it's goofy, it's quiet, it's eclectic, these other character traits. And so after doing that work with those kids for so a while, I was like, well, who am I? I don't know I don't know my character traits. And so to name that, since then, this is about 5 years, I literally sit and go, what are my character traits? Like, I tell people I'm an athlete, like I'm an athletic headspace. My brain is an athlete, whether I play or not. and there's character traits around the athlete, or I would name I'm super goofy. Like I'm very lighthearted. I'm very serious and nerdy. So my inverse is super not, right? And these are things that never change. I've been this way my whole life. So the way I find my self-esteem now is not in what I like. It's not my favorite color. It's not these things like that. And it's also not my preference in terms of like, you know, I like love movies. It's literally these things in my energy that don't change. That just, I don't know, it feels, not that likes and preferences are wrong, but the character traits to me feel so good because you can't take them away from me. You know, you can't say, well, that movie's bad. You know, I don't like it. And then now I feel bad because I like it. So that's something that I find my security in. And I think I do that with other women. I'm trying to have us locate our character traits outside of what I would call norms. So the whole other conversation, but who we are in the inside.
Yeah, I want to jump in just real quick there, Angela, because it made me think about, so a lot of times, you know, people build self-esteem based on accomplishments. And I think that's similar to what you're saying, like what you're good at, how productive are you? And I think what happens is when you're not producing or when you're not accomplishing anything, it's like your sense of self-esteem decreases because you've wrapped your whole identity up in like all of these things you can do as opposed to who you are. And so I think, yeah, that stands out to me.
That's good. Good shit for us.
You know, I can't tell you exactly when, but it was somewhere between like age 38 and I'm now 43, where I adopted this phrase that I'm in a love affair with my life, which meant that I had to have a love affair with myself. Like I needed to just like lay down all the ways in which I've been compared over and against others, that I've internalized, maybe the ways in which I have felt like I needed to be like others. A good part of my story has been, you know, having to ask myself, am I performing my life or am I living my life? That's just an examination question for me. And so I think when something again, around age 38 to now, I just began to realize like I can't perform anymore, which means I can't be who you've told me I need to be. I think I've just like listened in too hardcore to other people saying this is what's going to give you value. And so then I started to internalize that as my worth, but it was kind of like, what actually makes me happy? What actually fills me with joy? What actually breaks my heart? It's like I had to like really just like listen to me and learn to like that, learn to like the things that I like that I naturally recognize come from the deep place of who I am. And I think every single day I'm actually really realizing what gives me, not so much like what gives me worth, but like how I am worthy because of who I am. I feel like I'm living way more genuinely and authentically today than maybe on the greatest day that people were exalting or praising me, 20 years ago when I was jumping through hoops. Now I'm like, I don't like hoops actually. Like, and that's like really my life, is that I just really I kind of don't care about, I realize I actually don't care about hoops all that much. And, Margaret, you asked like, how am I cultivating that? I think one of the ways is kind of doing what Jesus does, which is turning everything into a question. Like, who do you say that I am? Well, I'm learning to have to ask myself now, Lisa, who are you? Which sounds like a really crazy question, but I am having to ask myself now, Lisa, are you doing this because you think you need to, or because you actually is coming out of the wellspring of who you are? But the second is, I have just made a commitment that I need not be with people who will not let me be fully me, who are like, if you put on stockings, if you only did this, if you decided that you like that. I mean, if you make me jump through a hoop, we might have a relationship, but we aren't going to be friends. I mean, like, you can have relational capital with people, but you don't call it friends. Like, which is one of the reasons why I love you all very much. It's like, you don't make me have to be like you in order to be loved. You let me be me. And I need that. Like, that's how I breathe, is when I'm with people who aren't saying, well, if you only like wore that or did this, maybe. It's you don't add caveats. And for that, I'm really grateful.
So, Yes. Sitting in my trauma course for my doctoral work, my professor said, made the claim that to compare yourself to another is a form of self-contempt. This idea that, you know, if you're comparing yourself, you're automatically saying that you're not good enough, and that, you know, you have some level of resentment and contempt around that. And that was, I was already on my journey by that time, but I think that is what made me lean into how I live out the Imago Dei, to be created in the image of God, and what that means, which is love, right? So I see God as love. So how do I live, like literally embody the love of a creator, right? Whose love never shifts. Love is always steady. Love has always existed, right? There's nothing more foundational than the love of the creator. And it came for me, I think I go on highs and lows. So, you know, I don't necessarily see life as, oh, we get there and we're there. It is more so, you know, it's cyclical. So it's this idea that we're cyclical, but the idea is to either be moving up or forward as we're on this journey. And so things will come around. It's just that I want to make sure that when I hit that place again, I'm in a different place, or, you know, it doesn't take quite as long for me to get through that cycle. And so one of those cycles came a few months back, maybe 6 months or so back, when I entered into prayer one morning, was doing what I normally do, connecting with how I experience God in a space with me, and began to do intercessory prayer. So I began to pray for other people, and it was like I couldn't. You always, like, something literally came and stopped me, like I couldn't. And so I got really, really still. And the best thing I can describe as God communicating with me, right? Because I never professed to know without question that something was God. But the best I can describe as God communicating with me were these questions that started to pop up, right? So these questions of, yes, but what do you need? What do you want, right? How do you need me to love on you? And I was like, well, I feel like I am loved. Like, I got that, right? And then this image of myself walking into a store to purchase a gift for my daughter came up in my mind. And the question that came was, when you go and purchase a gift for your daughter, do you purchase it with the intent of saying, oh, I'm going to pick that out for her because she's going to be able to share this with this friend and this friend and this friend and this friend? I'm like, no, I go in and I purchase a gift for my daughter because I want to bring my daughter joy, right? I want to see her delight. And so then the question was, so why is it that you cannot receive some gifts from me that are just for you? Right? You don't have to just give away. Like it was as if I was taking from God the delight of just gifting me, because God loves me.
Girl.
God loves me.
Ooh.
You know, and I sat there in tears, and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that in this unconscious way, I had begun to to try to earn my love and my worth and my value. And God was like, no, just stop. Like, I just want to gift you. I want to love on you. I want to pour into you, because that's what brings me joy, because I love you that much. Just you keep it for a while. Not that we don't ever share, but you keep it for a while. And again, you all, this was just 6 months ago, right? This is me walking unapologetically in who I am. And I realized that I'm on this journey of God constantly peeling back my sense of value and worth and what I feel like I'm deserving of, not realizing that that's what grace and love is. Like, the love is unconditional. And so that's kind of at the core. So I'm always leaning into this piece of, you know, the love of the divine says that I'm worthy. There is no higher currency than that. Like, there's nothing that can rival that currency. There is nothing more valuable.
Wow.
Ooh.
And
Donna.
you took Lisa from tambourine to talon tissues in like 10 seconds flat.
10 seconds.
Oh,
Yes, Donna.
I was about to lay out,
Wow.
but there are no ushers here to come and drape.
I know, can't
I
nobody bring
sit
you a sheet or
I sit
nothing.
upright.
Y'all real churchy today. Y'all real churchy.
Real
right.
churchy. Real
No.
church. Some days you got to lean into the churchy church.
Can I
It's
just
my
name
story.
something?
It's my story.
Girl? And I don't want to move from that word, but when I hear you talk, my question is always like, why do we do that, right? And so when I think in my head, somebody said that we're talking about Black Lives Matter. We're talking about mattering being a mattering of economic value in this country and socializing to matter based on our earning potential. Somehow that seeped into my spiritual psyche. Like the earning potential, it's not our fault that we have earned our value with God. We actually like absorb that in how everything around us, Angela, you're good at this. Oh, that's who I am. You know, anything that I can become a valuable in terms of my body mattering is what like a principality kept like telling me you're good. So for me, the evil was an affirmation, right? Like now people who affirm me, they're beautiful people. I'm not saying the affirmation's wrong, but somehow something in my brain went, every affirmation that was based on my mattering, I like leaned into. And so when I hear you talking, why it gets emotional is guys like, you matter because you matter. Like not
That's
because
it.
you could pick this many bearers of cotton, like legitimately, like you matter because I created you. I just want you to delight. Like that is going to be for us as Black women, to me, my spiritual like life goal to just sink that in because of how much I've absorbed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I jump in right here? I think as Black women, we also, and this goes back to something you said, Angela, but we also always put ourselves in the context of what we do for other people. So it's almost like our sense of self-worth is wrapped up in how we help people, how people come to us and need us, how we're always there. You know, I heard a young girl, I did a workshop one time, and these girls were in the 8th grade. And I asked them to kind of name some things about themselves, some positive traits, right? Qualities. And this little girl said, I'm selfless. She said it like very, like it was like a badge of honor. She was like, I'm selfless. And I had to unpack that with her. Like, what does that mean? I put others before I put myself. And afterwards, because I didn't want to put her on the spot at that moment, you know, I said, well, I think we have to kind of look at what that means when we're constantly putting other people before ourselves. What do we give ourselves? We give ourselves what's left. And as a result, we feel like our sense of worth and value is only wrapped up in what we can give and not what we can receive. And so even when I'm entering into relationships with men, one of the questions I ask is, what are you willing to give? Because I know what I'm worthy of. I know what I'm deserving of. So I got to know that you're willing to give those things, right? But sometimes when we're in relationships with people in general, we're always thinking about what can we give? What can we give? What can we give? And it makes it difficult for us to even receive the love that we deserve, which is why I stand on the affirmation, I deserve to be loved. I deserve to be well. I deserve to be loved well.
That's a word.
This is good. Elise, did you have something that you wanted to share? No? Okay. Nope. So I do want to name kind of my own self-worth and how I define my own self-worth. And I think y'all are touching on it. But I'm a believer in affirmations. I believe, you know, like Lisa always says, words create worlds. And I believe that the words that we speak over our lives have power. And so I remember I was doing my dissertation work and I was interviewing women, and essentially these women had like reached the top of their field. They were very successful in terms of like our society's definition of success. And one of the questions or prompts I said was, describe or tell me about your spiritual identity. So a lot of them would say, you know, I'm a Christian woman, I was raised Christian, or, you know, I'm a Buddhist. And, you know, they named religions and they named these like strategies for spiritual wellness. But I remember one participant, she said, my spiritual identity is I am enough. And she started telling me what that meant for her, and it just resonated. Like, I went from tambourine to tears, you know, it's in 10 seconds.
I can get the tambourine if you need me to.
But I, ever since I heard it, I just held on to it. And I said, you know, that's it. Like, I am enough. There's nothing else I need to do, earn, no degrees I need to earn, no amount of money I need to make, no clothing, no red bottom shoes, no friends, you know, no collection of friends, none of that, to be worthy of not only, you know, God's love, but even my own love. And so to say I am enough is a declaration that, you know, who I am right now is enough. Like, I'm worthy in and of myself. And I have everything I need in order to be who I was called to be. So that's how I kind of named my own self-worth. And I hope to cultivate that in other people, especially Black women, as being an example of it, like living it, showing people like you don't have to continue to strive and do all of these things to make people love you. To be your authentic self is enough. So yes. Did you want to say something, Angela?
Oh, well, because you mentioned mantras, and I don't want to take forever, but I have this picture my brother took of me that I was going to share around a mantra. I used to be bulimic, so I used to throw up my food, which is a very rare thing for Black women in this way, but I'm from Southern California. And so I was bulimic for about 10 years of my life. And at the end of my bulimia, I had this whole spiritual moment where I read this book. It was great. And I remember taking the book out to the water, which the water is my spiritual space. And I held the book and I was just crying because I finally felt like, oh God, like I can be free of feeling ugly because I feel pretty. And my brother took a picture. I'll show you all.
Wow.
And I didn't know he did. I was about, I think, 17 or 18. And at that moment, the reason why I started crying was because God said to me, I will pursue you like the waves pursue the shore. And it was like this mantra that has been in my soul, like I'm wanted. Like for me, it's like I'm being pretty was being wanted. Like that was according. God was like, I'm gonna keep relentlessly coming back to you.
Yes.
I just lost it, y'all. And so that when you say mantras, like I know now, even if I run from pastor, if I run from whatever, if I don't do what I'm called, if I mess up, God's like, I still want you. I still want you, you know. That's my boo-boo, like the running after. So I didn't know he took a picture, so show you again.
That's beautiful.
I need y'all to prepare me next time.
I know, y'all should really dropping them. Like
can't
one
prepare
after the
for
other
this.
today.
You can't prepare for this. This is good. This is so good. So my last question, and I guess it's more of like a conversation, and if there's anything else that you want to say that's kind of on your heart to say, just share it. This is, you know, open space. But, and you all have already kind of spoken to how your faith mediates this conversation and how your faith mediates your sense of self-worth. So I guess what I'll ask is, you know, what, so you can answer the question, either the question, how might our faith help us to mediate this conversation about self-love and self-worth? Or if there's anything else you want to share with the people who are listening to us right now, I would invite you to do that as well.
So yes, I have something to share, and I think it's connected to the question that you have. So in ancient cultures, even like some of the time period of Old Testament, it was believed that to know a person's name was to know them intimately. It was to actually be able to access their power. And I can remember growing up, you know, watching Roots, Alex Haley's Roots, which was actually a true story that took place in the county that I grew up in, Caswell County, and a neighboring county, Alamance County, in that area. And, you know, the famous scene that so many people see with Kunta Kinte refusing to take on this name, right? So, you know, he is an enslaved person who is refusing to let his mind go, to give up his spirit, to give up his emotions, even though his body, his physical body was being subjected to this oppression. And I think about Lisa saying earlier, you know, how many of us, you know, may not have those connections to our original families. Like, we don't know our names, but like for me, the kind of healing in that, or the redemption in that, is not that I won't one day discover, but it's that if in this world that is so incredibly hostile towards the Black feminine body, if they don't truly know my real name, right? Because my name is in me, right? It's evolving. Who I am is evolving. If they don't know my true name, then they can never really get to the intimate parts of me. Mm-hmm. They can never, ever have access to my power. And so, you know, I use this historical landscape of being a descendant of enslaved persons in this nation. I use this historical landscape of, yes, there is this name that I was given. There is this name that is a part of me, but there is a name that runs deeper, right? There is a name that no one can touch. And that name is it's still my name, even though I've never known it. It's still my name. And no one can access that power that's at work in me. No one can touch that intimacy, as Toni Morrison, right? Come inside and touch, you know, no one can touch that. And so I still live and breathe and operate in those I was connected to well before my ancestors were enslaved in this country. And that is a part of who I am and my legacy as I serve and press for justice in this space. And so
I'm talking too much, let me know. But this comes back to my last name, my whole situation. And this could be a bomb we can talk about another time. But for those of us who are in heterosexual marriages, who do traditional last name changes, that was a really tough moment for me. My last name we're the only ones who have it. In fact, we think it is slave people revolting against a slave named Whitehall and then shifting it, just calling it Whitenhill because you can't find it anywhere. It is a Scottish barn, apparently. Like, my brother's in Scotland and there's a Whitenhill farm. So we might be Scottish, but we don't know, right? So I had this last name, ended up getting married in my first marriage. And the whole time trying to like put on the new name, it was this like emotional, psychological, it was hard, y'all. It shouldn't have been. I was trained to enjoy that part and be so excited that I have a new name. But it was just, in general, just tough to say it all the time. Long story short, it was a very traumatic, abrupt end of a relationship. And then I'm left with this like stamp, this name, this like 5 years, my career's on this name. And I felt like I felt cheated from that. I felt, I literally psychologically became another me, like another version of me. And then when it cut off, I was like, okay, now who am I? So then I got rid of the name, went back to my maiden name, and that didn't fit me anymore. And that was the most hardest part, was like I had changed into this person's wife. So then when I got married again, I had this whole thing about names. I know we all go through that. But when you said that there's like a name people don't know, I called myself something in the in-between that I won't share, right? That when I wrote down my maiden name, but I actually identified something else, and it was like, nothing's gonna own me. Like, I don't belong to anything. I belong to myself right now.
yes.
And so when I did get married again, I chose to keep my first name, my maiden name and the new name as markers of my journey, as pieces of myself, but my full self is neither, honestly. And show about the power of your name. The only reason why I added my husband's name, and he's great, I love this guy, as a woman trying to figure out, this is gonna change my psychology, was that the strength of who he is actually has supported a new version of myself organically. So I didn't change my last name until I changed, honestly. And I was like, oh, I'm Angela Whitenhill Shields now. Cool. Now I'm going to shift that over. It wasn't a forced change. And not that, changing your name when you're married is wrong. But I think it was so powerful to only change my name when I change organically. And I told him, if I don't change, I'm not changing my name. If I say Angela Whitenhill, then that's who you married. That's who you're going to have. And so it's just a really now a powerful thing. When I say Angela Whitenhill Shields, there is like a journey in that. There's a fortified sense of who I am, and I have evolved into that organically. It wasn't something I just had to force myself into. So.
This is, it's like so simple. Margaret, as you asked about like faith, I really love something about the creation narratives. I mean, I know we could debate all day long about the creation narratives, but there's a part in Genesis where it says that God looks at everything that God creates and says that it's very good. And I think for me, if I had to think about another name that I would take on, it would be very good. And as I am, I think, bumping into myself and coming to know myself fully, it's not that I just say those words, I actually believe those words. And I'm just learning that I need to believe what my Creator has said about me.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel a similar way when it comes to kind of like how does our faith support us in this. So I think, again, connected to this narrative of creation, or the idea of being created in the image of God, like, or even in Psalm 139, where, you know, says your eyes beheld my unformed substance, you knit me together, like all this stuff. It's like, oh, like, God, you did this on purpose. You know what I'm saying? Like all that it is on purpose. Let me honor your intention by being who you created me to be. And so I think that's the way that kind of the way in which I like to encourage other people. I often said, in my youth ministry days, I often said to young people, like, if God needed another person just like them, just like the people you're trying to be like, then God would not have created you. So honor who God has created you to be. And for women, I think in particular, to know, I think Donna was talking about kind of, the expectations on women to kind of like support everybody else and to support, everybody else's dream. And I'm like, well, what about what God created you for? That like there is something that you're supposed to be doing, something that you're supposed to be pursuing. When you do that, like, just as you feel like you need to support everybody else or whatever, there are people who God has ordained to support you, in reaching that. So don't kind of forsake your purpose in trying to prop everybody else up to meet theirs.
Girl.
I just want to jump in really quickly because Shalise, you made me think of something. But in the book of one of the chapters of Isaiah, there's this real strong moment where I know that God will never let us be called by an incorrect name, by malformed names, where it literally says, "You shall be called by a new name that the mouth of the Lord will give." It's kind of like, quiet all these other voices who don't know what they're talking about. You will no longer be called desolate. You will be called "My delight is in her." Your land will not be like, your name will not be married.
Preach, Lisa.
It's like God will literally body block.
Yes.
I understand the divine will body block those who say anything that's not correct about me. So again, I keep going back to the fact, like, who are you to tell me who I am? Like, God said, I will give you because these people really out here are reckless, calling you all kind of stuff that you don't need to believe in. And I just think that something about, do I actually believe the whispers of God when God says?
Come on, Lisa.
Yeah. And I feel, I know we've got to wrap up, but I want to say what Lisa has just said has prompted me. I feel like I need to say this.
Yes, please.
If you have someone in your life who is identifying differently than how you expect them to identify, whether that's gender, whether that's sexuality, whether that's spirituality, religion, whatever it is, we all have the right to be called what we desire to be called. And so do not take from anybody their right to be called what they want to call. Like if Pookie no longer wants to be called Pookie, then call him by his name. If that is not a name that he desires for his family to call him, I don't care how long you've been calling him that. Honor people's desire to be called by the name they choose or desire. That is a gift, but it's a right. It is something that you would desire. Please honor God by honoring them in that way.
Yeah, that's so good. Y'all, this is okay, so we're gonna wrap, but not wrap. I'm sitting with a lot, but one of the things I'm thinking about just in response to honoring God's intention, believing the whispers that the names that God has given us, honoring what people want to be called. I'm so into like tools for self-awareness for this very reason, because I think a lot of times we don't believe what God says about us is because we don't know who we are. Like we haven't tapped into understanding how God created us, how God names us, who we are, how we've been shaped, how we've been formed. And so I spend a lot of time doing that for myself. And the reason I do that is because, and I shared this with a friend one time, she was talking to me and I said, you know, one day you're going to wake up and you're going to remember who you are. You're going to remember, you're going to realize it, and you're going to remember. I never want to forget who I am. I never want the voices of other people to outspeak the voice that I've established in my own spirit and in my own heart that says, Margaret, you are beloved. You are a pearl. You are a treasure. You are valuable. Because there are so many people that want to dim that. There's so many people that want to quiet that voice within us. And so I think just in conclusion of this episode, I want to just remind all of us that whatever our name is, whatever our true name is, that we deserve, like Donna said, we deserve to be called by that name. And we first have to call ourselves that name. And so I would encourage anyone who is listening, if you need a new name, I would ask you to just speak, pray, ask for that new name. What does God name you? How are you named? Who are you? And with that, we are going to conclude. This has been another episode of Talks with God. And we will see y'all next time.